Hello and welcome to the FlowRy Show, a journey through life's tapestry, wisdom for every generation. On this show, we talk about where generations intertwine, sharing stories, insights, and dreams. Whether you are a seasoned sage or a curious young mind, we are all students in the grand classroom of life. Here with me today is my co host, Mike Ryan, and a special guest. I am your host, Nicole Flowers. As we explore a tapestry woven with threads of collaboration, dreams, and lessons learned along the way, I would like to turn it over to Mike, who will introduce our special guest as we dig right into with the life of this special person. Mike?
Thank you, Nicole. It's always a pleasure to have these conversations of different generations within the workplace. Early on in my career, one of the greatest influence and mentors, and someone who's also my mom, is Ann Ryan. So I'd like to introduce Mom and give a little background. This is our part two of this episode, and really looks into a person who would be called, in most cases, a super mom, because not only did she have 7 kids that she raised, but also she started several businesses that some went back as early as the 1950s that she worked with my father. And then they started another company in 1969, as well as some other companies that was called Ryan Advisors, but also they started an executive search firm called ProSource, and they started another company called MDS, Medical Design Specialists, and News Group Communications. So a pretty diverse group of companies that were based in DC, but really had an impact on healthcare and healthcare design globally. And we may go into that at some point. But then after that, in her, I believe when she had just turned around 60, Mom joined an association and really supercharged what they were doing as far as membership, because she's a super connector and something that I've learned about super connector, but also could share some of the beyond the technical part of the company, which is objects like the ASPRS, I believe, in photogrammetry and remote sensing, that she worked for, I think, for about 8 years or so. But in some of the discussions offline, we talked about some of the intergenerational collaboration, as well as some of the intergenerational conflict that she experienced there. So Mom would like to welcome you to the show, to part 2, and let's have some fun and talk about what you went for your life journey, as well as from a work point of view, as well as working with multi-generations within the workplace as both an owner and also as an employee later years.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. And it's a pleasure having you on the show. And I echo Mike's sentiment. Welcome to the show as we share the life of Ann Ryan, part 2. And you truly have a remarkable journey. It has been a testament to determination, resilience, and a passion for making a difference. As Mike started alluding to around photogrammetry and remote sensing, you have an innovative spirit that extends beyond your entrepreneurship achievements to the cutting edge, which has led you to the cutting edge field of photogrammetry and remote sensing. I've gathered from conversations with Mike that you have maintained membership with the American Society for Photogrammetry Remote Sensing at the James Madison University. Why don't you share with our audience what initially sparked your interest in photogrammetry and remote sensing? And if you could just define for our audience, what is photogrammetry and remote sensing, just for our younger viewers?
That was not my skill. My skill was in membership, but I went online to describe it, and in a way that is easier for people to. But anyway, it's photographing in different ways, and they're used. It's used in so many businesses. ASPRS was started in 1932, and they were very what's the word I want to use, helpful in winning World War II, because we had a lot of members as spies that were spies. And I don't know much about that, but I know that that's one of the things they taught us all. Anyway, I started in, I got involved because I had retired, and I was, after 3 years, I was sick to death of not doing anything useful besides playing bridge and playing tennis and going to lunch. And so I said, my youngest son had graduated from college, and he was looking for a job, and the paper was out on the table, and right in front of me was a column that was about 9 inches long and just a column wide, and it said they needed a membership service coordinator, and it was on Grosvenor Lane, and that Grosvenor Lane, I'm on Grosvenor Place, and you were supposed to write him a letter, and I decided I wasn't going to do that. I got in my car and drove up 2 blocks, and my sister was dying in Miami, and I had flown down to basically say goodbye to her, and while I was waiting I had my resume started. So I grabbed this undone resume, and I walked in, and I said, "Is your personnel director here?" And she said, "Yes, you want to talk to him?" And I said, "Yes, I'd love to." And he came out, and I waved my resume at him, and I said, "I could do this with my hands tied behind my back." And he looked at me like, "Yeah, right," And we talked for about 10 minutes, and he said, "Can you go to Denver in 2 weeks?" And I said, "Of course." Anyway, and I was there from 1960 to 1983. So I worked there till I was 65 full time. But 2 weeks later, they asked me, would I please come back and work part time? And I said, I would, if you let me do the hours I want to do. So I would play tennis and go up and work, or play bridge and go up and work, or whatever. They let me do exactly what I wanted to do. A lot of times I'd go in at 7 a.m. And anyway, it worked out very well.
So I think what you showed there, and again, I'm not an expert on photogrammetry or remote sensing, but I think it's almost pervasive in today's environment. Every day I see Waymo, I see, these Google Maps, I see Amazon and SpaceX, and everyone uses photogrammetry and remote sensing. And Mom helped really build that membership. I think you said they had 11 sustaining members.
They had 15 sustaining members. Oh. I took it up to about 200 and something because they didn't have time to get them to get the corporations to come in. And so I think I said this on the last podcast, but I had said, did I not?
I don't know. Go ahead, tell us.
Yeah,
I
went to the boss and I said, we need somebody to be to help these corporate members out, because we're not, for what they have to pay, we're not doing enough for them. He said, you're it. Get your cards made up. So I became the sustaining member liaison to the corporations. And so then I started working on it, because that was my role then, more so than just the membership services coordinator.
Yeah, I think an important thing here that it's kind of subtle, Nicole, in our viewers, is that Mom is not passive. She is someone who is a woman of action. Right. You have to be women in action to raise and 7 children. But some really nuanced things. So she didn't necessarily have a resume. She didn't, don't let perfection be the spoiler of good or getting things done. Right. So she didn't just send it in or hopefully that someone would pick it. She actually got in her car and drove, even though it was a few blocks away, to the organization, showed her action, and then was assertive in telling, who she was, what she'd done, and I say every day people recognize talent, and that HR individuals say, wow, this is a person that can bring value to our organization. And they saw that in Mom, and then she was there 13 years. Is that
No,
what it was?
Years. I was
15?
there from 1960 to 1983.
Not 1960. Couldn't have been. That was the year I was born. But anyway, you spent a lot of time there and helped them grow to the organization they are today. The other thing that I think is kind of very interesting is that the thing that sticks out in my mind and how you made a transition, because when you were an entrepreneur running Ryan Advisors and other corporation, you're basically 24/7. And I say this all the time when I talk to entrepreneurs on a Friday. I say, have a nice weekend, whatever that means, right? Because most of the time you're working. There's no such things as weekends. And most people during COVID realize what entrepreneurs deal with every day. And that is, you have no idea what day it is, because you're working. A Saturday's like a Monday, like a Sunday's in many cases like a Tuesday. But one thing that you also talked about just a few minutes ago is that after a while, you really changed from being the silent generation, which is at the great generation, how you demarcate them, and then the baby boomers, who are very similar to the silent generation, but a lot louder. And all your children are the baby boomers, right? From 1946 to 1964. But the thing that you learned is that you actually turned in more like a millennial that saw more of the life balance. You said, I'm going to play tennis. I'm going to get the job done, but I don't need to be working 24/7. So you shared with me earlier, what is a famous quote that people say on their deathbed?
Yeah, I wish I would have done more work.
Yeah, I wish it never was that said.
Yeah.
It's people say on their deathbed, I wish they spend more time in the office. No, they want to spend more time with their family or doing what they like, playing tennis or whatever. So I think that, from a generational thing, I think the three generations above the millennials are so work focused, right? And I think we're seeing a balance of that with millennials and Generation Z. Now it can go the other way. As far as
the reason that is, I think that the kids never saw their father in my generation. The kids never saw their dads because they were so busy trying to make a living to support them. And they didn't want to do that to their kids. The generation now does so much. One of the things is my son-in-law, John Crane, who's a scientist at NIH. I mean, he does a lot of the cooking, and he's always there. I remember him doing Jordan's lunch. I mean, he was full on with those kids because they didn't want to be like their dads. So and we were talking earlier about lost my train of thought.
It's okay. Yeah, I think the thing is that over the generations, you learn how to balance, I guess now, more of a life work balance that you have. And then the other thing that changed it with COVID, we don't necessarily, as they would say, have seats, butts in the seats, to be crass about it, to be in the office, because we can communicate whether you're in the same city, country, or whatever. We can do it by using Zoom or other technology, GoToMeeting or whomever. That becomes more acceptable than just being in the hallway. Now you could argue there's things you get lost by not being in the same hallway and having that water cooler talk and the like, but. It's definitely saw where, even myself, you talk about that, my two older children, I was a hospital CEO, but when I moved from DC to Louisiana, I was only a few blocks away from school. So I would go to, all the things where I could say that probably, my dad wasn't able because he was traveling all over the world. Right. And so, it's just a different expectations and what children went through, let's say the baby boomers or my children who are millennials, what their expectations are within the workplace as well as a family unit. What's it called? Latchkey kids? I still don't know the word. Yeah. You're right. So, you would go home and and whether you lived in a big city or whatever, and you had I mean, the other generation, I was just thinking, Mom, when you were growing up, I mean, you hung out basically on a farm, right? Or your house or whatever. You didn't have television, right? Television didn't come into the 50s and 60s,
Right.
where that generation of the baby boomers grew up on television. And that's the good, the bad, and the ugly. I mean, I remember growing up and see the Vietnam War, mostly and I also remember, believe it or not, 1963, November 22nd, right? And the funeral of John F. Kennedy that happened there. One of the earliest visions I remember was watching the funeral procession. So,
well, your dad took the 4 oldest kids to the funeral.
Oh, okay.
You were too young, and
yeah.
And Paul wasn't born yet, so you and Stephen were kept.
Yeah, and I think those experiences. Let's use television because things that you remember, right? I mean, I remember our family sitting around watching the moon landing, right, in July of 1969. We were with family and friends in our den, and we watched that. And then you take that to your workplace, right? And I would say digital health. People say, "Oh, that just started during COVID." I said, "Look." Michael Collins, who was our neighbor at the beach, was the 3rd astronaut. It was Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and Michael Collins. And Michael, after they did the mission, they were heading back to to Earth. He took off all his telemetry, and Houston said, Apollo 11, we have a problem. We can't get Michael's telemetry, using digital health or digital type thing. And he famously said, "I'll tell you when I stop breathing," right? And you bring those experience. And I just add this, is that you remember the television generation of the baby boomers are now less than, 10, 15% of the workforce, right? But those experience, I also remember when Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated and Martin Luther King, just, a month before that. And you take those rich experiences to the workplace and you remember them. The kids that, are in generation millennials, they're taking we had duck and cover because of the nuclear bomb with Russia, right? These kids are taking what you need to do with a mass shooter that comes to campus, and you take that to the workplace, right? And you take COVID to the workplace. My youngest son started high school during COVID, so his first 2 years of high school was spent on communicating like this and not having human interaction. So you take that to the workforce. So I think that we all bring unique experiences. And Mom, you definitely if you could share kind of what your experience, because you work with SOCON, and share with that, and who SOCON was your boss, who you had basically, most people were retired what you did because you would never want to retire, but you eventually did. But SOCON was a generation younger than you, right?
She was
so share a little bit about that.
Well, she was 20 years younger, and she was my boss when I went up to ASPRS because she was Asian, and she was somewhat harassed. I guess that was a decent word for it. But I remember our accountant there was a woman who was always ragging on her. And I remember one time I thought, I'm not going to put up with this anymore. So we were in the office, we had an office together, and I heard her coming, and I got up and I put both hands on the door and I said, "Can I help you?" And she backed off. She was ready to give SOCON problems again. And she never, ever did that again. So Con was my boss, but I was her mentor, I guess I could say.
Yeah, beautiful example.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I loved her. I'm still trying to get in touch with her. She doesn't answer the phone, so I'm afraid she's not in good health. She was on one of the first planes from Cambodia, and the plane was so filled that they all had to sit on the floor, and they just crammed them in and got them here. But she made something of herself. I mean, can you imagine coming from Cambodia,
right,
and doing what she did?
And she was there. She was there for how many years? I mean, I think you told me that.
28 years.
28 years. Wow.
28 years.
Wow.
And we
A
were,
generation, totally a generation spending at
we were best friends. Yeah, we were best friends. So.
Yeah, I mean, I met her. I remember you would have her parties and stuff like that, family parties. And tell me maybe another generation as far as when that, transition happened at the organization. There was someone even a generation younger.
Oh, you're talking about that little, I can't remember his name. Thank God I can't.
It's best that you don't remember. We don't want to get screwed.
But I wanted to continue. I was 83, but I loved that job. I mean, I just loved that job. And I got to go on trips twice a year. And he didn't want to pay my salary anymore. So I was let go. And I'm so mad at myself that I didn't call the president, who I was good friends with at ASPRS, and say, look, this little snot-nosed kid doesn't want to pay my salary. And anyway,
don't sugarcoat it, Mom.
And then so Tom was telling me he was being so mean to her that she was there for 28 years, was supposed to retire at 30, but she couldn't stand it anymore. So she left before retirement, which took down her retirement. And I'm so mad at myself, looking back, that I didn't, when that happened, that I didn't call the president of ASPRS. But, hindsight.
Hindsight's best, but I mean, you're when you're in the chaos or whatever you want to call it of that kind of, because you've been there you were there half the tenure that she was, but both of you brought great value to that organization.
We did.
I mean, the membership you did and what SoCon did, and the little snot, what if you call it, maybe he learned a lesson from that.
Well,
right?
he got fired shortly after that. So the good thing is he was taking the company into bankruptcy. And now ASPS is no longer, because of COVID and other things, it's no longer up the street. It's when I called because Social Security felt they owed me money. So I called, I never heard back, and wrote a letter, never heard back, and I let it go. I just, But anyway, I said, where are you? She said, I'm in Philadelphia. I said, where's the base? And she said, Louisiana.
Yeah, Baton Rouge. I just looked it up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And it's like, they were founded in 1932, I believe you said.
Yeah.
And so the organization is actually a year younger than you.
Yeah, exactly.
But
it kind of ties.
Yeah, I said kind of tying into previous stories that we've had is that I have no doubt, I don't know for a fact, but this is my educated guess, that photogrammetry and remote sensing was used during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, GPS, for one thing, was one of our first sustaining members in global positioning surveys. And we're so involved in everything. I mean, I went online to find this out. The photogrammetry does it digital. It takes photograph and puts it together digitally to find out whether a restaurant should be in this particular place. They want to know the traffic pattern, whether it should.
Yep.
And it's very interesting. Anybody should go online if they want to know more about photogrammetry and remote sensing, to go online and look it up, because I never heard of it. I could hardly pronounce it
when you first joined it.
Yeah.
The images that, again, going back as a child and movies and the like, I remember when they were doing the Cuban Missile Crisis, and some of the movies probably or documentaries, they would always show Cuba and the what do you call it, aerial photograph before before the missiles were put in by the Russians, right? And then they showed them, and this is one of the deciding thing that Kennedy decided, oh gosh, they do have missiles. Here's a photo a few months before, and here's a photo a few months after that showed actual ballistic missiles pointed towards the United States, which was only 90 miles away. But I wonder if you mind sharing kind of just your perspective of, having lived through, I mean, I was alive, but I don't remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. Is there anything you could share with the audience, what you remember?
That's kind of an interesting thing because I had gone to the doctors that morning. I had had a miscarriage. And I'd gone to the doctors that morning, and he told me that I was still pregnant. I had lost a twin. And that was the day of the missile crisis. And we left the doctor's office and we went to the Navy. I forgot about the outlets.
PX. Yeah.
To get a burner, whatever, to Brunson. Is it called
Brunson burner?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we went to the grocery store and got tons of food, canned food. And we were scared to death. You all didn't know it that much, but we must have shown some of it. But anyway, then we went home, and basically, I think we stayed in the basement. I mean, but it was a very scary time, and thank God for John Kennedy that he stood his ground.
Right. And Mom, I wonder, just because I know your heritage or your background, that you were, you're born in 1931, no surprise there. So you were 10 years old when Pearl Harbor happened, about almost 11. What do you remember much about that? Because you have older brothers, so you mind just sharing a little bit of that history for our, multi-generational folks?
Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, and my mother, that's interesting because my mother had 3 boys and 3 girls in that order, and I was in the middle of the girls. And my brother Jack was already in the Navy. I think he was stationed in Hawaii, but not.
Mom, he was. Just so he was my godfather. In addition to being your brother, my uncle, he was stationed on the Arizona, and he was on leave to California. So his 1,200 crew members were killed during Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. And anyway, Jack was already in the Navy, and Gene, when he was 18, joined up, and Leo was I think it had to be a year or so later. Leo was 17, and Mother and Daddy signed for him to join. So I had 3 brothers in the Navy, and Mother made a little code map so that she would know my mother was very smart. This
is before the internet. This is before texting and TikTok and everything else. This is all paper.
Yeah. She made a code up. If you said it, she looked at the map of Japan, I guess, and the code was if you say, and because they were all, she would get
They're on the Pacific,
blacked out.
Right.
If they said, "How is Aunt Mary?" that mean they were in Guam, or if they were, anyway. So because she did that, she knew that all 3 of my brothers were in Okinawa at the same time. Wow. So anyway, they all came out alive. Gene was shot down twice. Gene just died at the age of 90, almost 99, a year ago.
Yeah, and just to give him a plug, he had 2 distinguished flying crosses. He's in the Aerospace Museum, and so a great legacy there. As well as, I won't go into details, but your father was got the Purple Heart in 1917 in France. So,
and he received it 25 years later.
Yeah.
He was written up in the Leavenworth Times because somehow or other they forgot to give it to him.
So beyond getting the family history there, Nicole, any questions that you would like to ask her? I don't want to keep you out of the conversations we have just about every day.
No, you're not. I mean, I'm just like our viewers just listening in on just the family legacy, the lived experiences that Anne has had over transcending generations, and just reflecting on these experiences from pioneering entrepreneur, artist, leader, a devoted matriarch. What are some of the most important important lessons you have learned along your journey? What are some of those more important lessons?
I think to be kind to people, to treat people the way you want to be treated. I feel that's one of the most important things to do, to be kind to people. And I taught my kids to be that way, and they all are. I mean, they're all kind, and my granddaughters and grandsons are the same way. I'm very lucky that they listened. So
Active listening skills you gave us.
And that's very key. I think sometimes we do more talking than listening. It's good to have that quality, active listening skills. You know, and as we're having these conversations with you, and thanks again for coming back on the show. You have maintained your vitality. You have prioritized nurturing your artistic expression through painting and photography. You've cultivated meaningful connections with friends and family and strangers. Just share with us some of the practices that you have done that served you well. How do you go about maintaining your energy and despite life's challenges? Because I know life has thrown some curveballs at you, but you're still able to swim above the horizon and pull through. Share with us some of those practices that have served you well.
Well, maybe one of the things is, instead of working all the time, to do some playtime. And I was able to play tennis and play bridge. And I think that's an important part of keeping yourself on key. So I don't know what else to say.
Oh, I mean, for me, I'm a runner and I enjoy going out and for that nice stroll. I call it my meditation moment as I immerse myself with Mother Nature, and it has served me well. It helps me to balance all of the various priorities that I have throwing at me. Mike, what about you? What are some of the things that you do just to help maintain your vitality?
I keep my hair, I shaved my head starting about 10 years ago, or not more than that, 15 years ago, because my youngest son would sit on my shoulders and did like Ratatouille, you know, if you remember the movie, and moving my head around and got my hair, pulled it out. So I finally shaved it one time. And so, you know, having a now 20-year-old son and having other kids, that definitely keeps your up and going to soccer games and doing that. I'd love to play tennis. I don't have necessarily the time. Should probably make the time. I know that at 90, whatever you were, Mom, she kind of had blasphemy in our family. There's a great battle in my family. The tennis people that my mom trained to be tennis, we were fortunate to have tennis courts growing up. And so I'm a diehard tennis player, as is my brother, Steven. But Mom started playing pickleball a little bit, about 2 or 3 years ago. That's now the craze. But I walk. We rescue senior dogs, and I walk them every day. We deal with them. And one thing that Mom kind of taught me, and I tell this to people that I mentor about 50 people around the globe. We talked about that previously, is that, you know, giving back and being kind to others is what I learned. And the mentorship, because most of my mentors were female. And so I always look to mentor people that don't look like me, that don't have my born in the United States. They may have been born in Africa or Asia or wherever, India. And so that takes up time, but it energizes me to have conversations with people that don't have my background and that I can learn from every day. And I say it's a difference between not working and with an O and networking with an E. And so it is definitely a part of me that I say, look, I give credit where credit is due. My parents taught me about having fun and networking when I started in grade school in 1966, and I still have those friends today. And fortunately, you know, we're getting to an age that, you know, they may have more time. Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, as I said, and my mom are my inspirations to never stop working. You know, she still draws, she still, you know, does things that may not be W-2 related, but whether it's counseling with your children or your grandchildren or your great grandchildren, because most of her grandchildren are in their 30s and have careers of their own. So I think it's really family, and that blur between family and, keep things moving forward are what energize me.
That's
This is just it has been another fantastic session. And as we look to close out today's conversation, what advice would you give your younger self just starting out? What would you have told yourself many decades?
Not to be afraid. Not to be afraid. I was very scary when I was growing up. I was very scared. And I remember when my brother came home from the war, my brother Gene that just died, he sat me down and he said, you've got to stop being so scared. He said, you're as good as anyone else, if not better. And I was sort of after that, I became an egomaniac.
Thank God. Success.
Anyway, it took me out of that, and it gave me the emphasis to not be afraid to do things, because I was so scared. And Stephen is kind of like that in different ways, because he's so smart. Yeah. But running is great. Nicole, my 3 daughters walk. Amy walks like 5 miles a day, and Alicia does the same, as Arena does too. So it's a great exercise. It doesn't matter what you do.
I think it, just looking back at it, we talked about it briefly, because your brothers, your siblings were 3 boys and 3 girls. Your family, right? Your 7 children, they were 3 girls and 4 boys. If that order would have been reversed, we may not be having this conversation, because I would have been in Vietnam. My brothers would have all been in Vietnam, and that impact. So we were blessed with that. We've been blessed with relatively good health. We've got, a matriarch that has been very generous to her extended family over the past few years. She's always been generous, but, she's also been a servant leader to other people and leading by example. And yes, she may have become a megalomaniac when she was 11 or 12, because her God bless his soul and may his memory be a blessing. Uncle Gene never married, but he had a great impact on our entire family. And Mom is the last of the generation with us. So, we're, like I said on the last show, she'll be around to celebrate my 100th birthday in, a few more years. And, why not, right?
Yeah, exactly. Indeed, life is a tapestry of experiences, and you have woven your threads of joy and challenges and growth, embracing each moment. And thank you for sharing your remarkable life, accomplishments, and values. And to our audience, sharing our stories creates a bridge between generations. It allows us to connect on a much deeper level, learn from others' experiences, as we have learned from the life of Anne, part 1, as well as part 2. So if you didn't hear part 1, please do tune in and listen to part 1. It was amazing, as we learned about how Anne foster understanding, embracing the power of building meaningful relationships and creating a more connected world. Any last tidbits, Anne, before we close out to our viewers?
Thank you so much for having me do this podcast. And I think that's it. Thank you so much. And Michael,
I would just say, love you, Mom. Love you to all of our audience. Life is good. Enjoy, have fun. Don't be fearless like Anne is and has been and will continue to be. Love you all.
And on that note, the journey continues. Until then, we will see you next time. Thanks for listening in. Have a wonderful day.